So about gun control, about legislation of gun control and limiting gun violence. Um, all of the technology that fits into this cellular phone. I mean, I have the rubber wrapper on this. It's unbelievable how slender cell phones are now. When I was a boy, I did envision this technological transformation happening. I was following what was happening in technology. I did think that this was inevitable, but I imagined it being more like a brick. I did think we would all be carrying around with us portable computers that incorporated telephones and cameras and things computers and word processors and email. And at that time, the fax machine, I thought, yeah, the equivalent of the fax machine is going to be miniaturized and made portable this way, so on and so forth. But I knew what circuit boards looked like. I knew circuit boards were becoming more and more powerful, but I never thought circuit boards would be so tiny as this, that I can place it between my thumb and forefinger like that. I did assume it would be bigger, even though I did. It was partly because of the science fiction I was reading. It was something I reflected on, partly just because of the science I was reading. I thought we were moving towards a society where everyone had this kind of video camera and computer with them at all times. All of the technology that fits into this tiny cell phone can be fit into the handle of a gun. All of it. It is possible for every firearm in the United States of America to take an image, take a photograph from a forward-facing camera, and to take a photograph from a backward-facing camera of the shooter and the person being shot, and to send it over the internet to the police station instantly, every single time you pull the trigger. It is possible for a gun to record your location with GPS, a global positioning system, the same way that every cell phone records your location with every text message you send. So some of you may have followed this in the news, some of you may not have. I have covered on my channel at least one case where there's evidence presented in court of exactly where the person's car was because they were text messaging while driving. And you get a map with a series of dots saying, yeah, at exactly this moment, she was driving her car at this intersection. At this moment, she was at this stoplight. At this moment, she was on the freeway, because it's someone engaged in this conversation that is on the record for the government, recording her precise location and what she was doing moment by moment with the cell phone. Okay, having all of the technology that is within a cell phone built into every firearm is attainable. It's easily attainable. There was a time when I was a boy. Imagine if someone had said to you, when I was a boy, we're talking about more than 30 years ago, oh, it'll be possible in the future to have a fingerprint detector that instantly reads your fingerprint and confirms that you're the owner of the gun. That might have sounded ridiculous or impracticable 30 years ago. Now, every single one of you is familiar with just how streamlined that process will be, just how instantly you can verify your identity. With facial recognition, right? A lot of you have phones that scan your face. With fingerprint recognition, right? So if you allow government regulation of gun ownership, we could be in a situation where when someone is mugged, they pull out their gun and point it at the mugger, and without even pulling the trigger, that gun is already taking photographs and uploading them to the internet, up and sending them to the police. The gun is already recording your exact location, the direction the gun is pointed in, who it's being pointed at, and it's even photographing. It could be recording audio too. You could have a microphone in there just as well as we have. It's recording exactly what happened to all parties, moment by moment, for the historical record. And in a sense, if you're defending yourself against a mugger, that could be a reason not to pull the trigger. Because as soon as you got the gun out, you can say, look, when this goes to court, you've already been had. Like, it's over. So, like, you should not attack me. You should put down your weapon, or you should, because, look, when the cops go over this footage, they're going to know exactly what happened and who you are and your face and where we were and what happened. So just give up. Just wait for the cops to come. Don't ruin your life. Don't put yourself in jail longer, and don't get shot. Right? So it may seem paradoxical. If you should have fewer shootings that way, you could have a database in the same way that today we are recording the location of every single voice message, every single text message, every single email sent from a cell phone. Every single bullet that's fired in the United States of America. That's far fewer. What do you think there are more of in America today? Text messages or bullets being fired? And yeah, a lot of that things in the database, it would just be, okay, at this time in this location, someone was firing a bullet in the middle of the forest. They were killing a deer. A lot of it's going to be information that's not legally useful or interesting. But then everyone involved would know that from the minute, it doesn't even have to be when they pull the trigger. It can be when their hand is on the gun, right? It can be before, even if it's only a few moments before they pull the trigger. Their location is recorded. Their identity is recorded, right? Who it is they're pointing the gun at is recorded. And you can even have a rear-facing camera recording that you're the one holding the gun. That today is easily attainable in the United States of America. And guys, guns are expensive. I mean, do you think this would even increase the price of firearms by $40? I don't. I think this would be invisible. I think you might be talking about $20 into the price, because you can buy a cell phone for $40. Most of the cost is the screen. You know, obviously we're not going to have we're not talking about having a full color screen on your gun so you can watch movies, so you can watch YouTube videos on your gun, right? So there were a lot of features of the phone that are not going to be there. It's going to be cheaper than a phone in many ways, right? But I'm saying the other elements of cellular phone technology, cellular phone networks, and so on, those can be seamlessly, invisibly integrated into even a handgun. Of course, there's plenty of room in a shotgun, right? So we're not on the cusp of a new technology that could change gun violence. For several decades, that technology has existed. Wouldn't you like to know what happened in each and every gun battle in America's conquest of Iraq, America's conquest of Afghanistan, the Ukrainian war against Russia right now, with the same level of specificity? This could be the end of war crimes as we know it. Imagine a man who's aware of this in time of war. This is one of the most common crimes in modern warfare. Imagine a man raping a woman at gunpoint. Sorry, guys, this is real talk. We're talking about real world here. And he's aware that this is being photographed, his precise location, that it's his fingerprint on the gun. He's aware that his army commanders are going to know this, that the police are going to know this, that the people who write the history books are going to know this, that this can never be secret, that even if he kills her after the rape so she can't tell anyone else, which is also common in war, in case you didn't know, that his crime, exactly what he did, exactly what he said, can be a microphone recording his voice in the gun too, that will be recorded for posterity. How would soldiers behave differently, even with the stress of the battlefront, right? Even with the stress of being in a war zone, if they know who they shoot, what they say, and what they do is being recorded, and that if they die, their heroism will be recorded for their own parents to see, for their own children and grandchildren to see, perhaps, right? And that if they behave dishonorably, what they do in war will be there for their parents to see, for their grandchildren to see, as well as journalists, politicians, military commanders. We have reached the point where the medieval fantasy of an omniscient God can be a technological reality built into the steel housing of every handgun. And this isn't new. Most of you are too young to remember a time before this technology existed. I'm just barely old enough to remember the rise of the cellular phone. The idea of mandating it is new. Okay. Because most people in positions of power do not want cell phone cameras and cell phone recordings of what goes on inside Guantanamo Bay. When prison guards, just within the normal prisons of New York City, Rikers Island, whatever example you want, when prison guards brutalize and intimidate and beat inmates, when prison guards shoot inmates, people in positions of power are quite comfortable with the ambiguity of relying on the word of the one and only witness to the event, who most often is the man who pulled the trigger. That when police shoot people, there are people in positions of power who are very comfortable with the only version of events being the police officer's version. And I'm not comfortable with that. We are progressing toward a society in which the professor standing at the front of the university has a camera recording everything he said, whether it's built into his hat or his eyeglasses or what have you. And where every single student in the crowd has a camera of some kind recording what happens. And this will result in a higher standard of behavior, a higher standard of deontology, if you like, for the professors and for the students alike, right? When I grew up, there were these cases of he said, she said about professors sleeping with students or professors flirting with students, professors saying politically incorrect things in class, sometimes professors saying racist things in class. Okay, well, that's over. We're entering into an era when even the most trivial controversy of this kind, of a politically incorrect professor, this kind of thing, where your opinion doesn't matter because we can all consult what's on the tape, quite possibly from 40 different angles, from the perspective of 40 different students, each and every one of whom has a recording device. So what is the future of gun violence in America? Is it a future of anonymity and impunity? That's what military gun violence has presumed. That's what police gun violence has presumed. And again, there are a lot of other people with guns, like prison guards, right? Anonymity, impunity, no accountability, and the elderly people who are currently in power. I'm sorry, but politics is dominated by geriatrics. People over 80 dominate politics within the Republican Party, within the Democrat Party. It's old people. It's people Joe Biden's age and older who dominate politics in most Western democracies today. They're real comfortable with that. All right. And there's a new generation coming up that's saying, whoa, 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 whoa. When there's even a minor dispute between a taxi driver and his passenger, it's all on tape. Like we're used to this. You know, sometimes the taxi driver punched the customer, but they say, yeah, but I punched the customer for a reason. You have to see it in context. We are accustomed to seeing footage of diners at McDonald's freaking out and assaulting the staff at McDonald's. It could be they grab a bunch of plastic spoons and throw them at the person. We know exactly what they did. We know exactly what they said. Within the halls of power, this may be different where you are, but in Taiwan, every time members of parliament punch each other, it's on camera, and they fight. They get into, fisticuffs in parliament. There were kind of little riots within their House of Parliament where they really, yeah. Some, where you live, your House of Parliament, I would assume most of the world, every little thing that's said and done inside your House of Parliament is recorded. Okay, so you think the battlefront just doesn't matter? You think what soldiers do in times of war is less important, is less significant than whether or not this taxi driver made a racist remark that justified the passenger in the taxi punching the driver, or, whether or not there are two different versions where the taxi driver says the passenger refused to pay money and the passenger says, no, the taxi driver ripped me off and stole my money. All of these petty disputes, right? We don't rely on witness testimony anymore. We rely on the godlike omniscience of portable recording devices that are in every home. They're in every pocket, and they can be on your hat or glasses or pinned to your lapel. They're one of the major responses to police brutality within the last 5 years has been to demand that every police officer wear a camera at all times. And then there's a separate question, which is constitutional. Who gets to control that footage? Is that footage immediately uploaded to YouTube where everyone can see it? Is it somewhere where Freedom of Information Act requests, where everyone can see every minute of every on-duty police officer's life, that if you're on duty with a gun, anyone can access that? Or, as often happens, is the footage only released after being censored, after being edited, that it's controlled, and that sometimes conveniently police departments just say they lost the footage isn't available. So if you follow these kinds of things in politics, you are aware these are issues. The existence and presence of the so-called body cam, that's the term, the body cam. Oh, so only police officers are going to wear a body cam, huh? Not soldiers in time of war? Does that matter more or less? Again, taxi drivers? Okay, what about the mayor? The mayor has no body cam? It's all just he said, she said shit for the mayor? What about your member of parliament? Like, what about really important political events? Oh, secrecy, anonymity, impunity, or accountability, transparency? Now, again, I used the example of a university professor for a reason. Now, I realize it may seem like a stretch. We're talking about gun violence. Now you're talking about a university professor preaching from the pulpit to his students, okay? I have known so many university professors who would be ashamed to watch the film of their own behavior back again. They'd be so ashamed just to hear the words out of their own mouth. I've known university professors who showed up drunk to give their lectures. There are university professors who show up under the influence of other drugs, but there are also just university professors who have a short fuse, who lose their temper. There are professors who preach ridiculous, extreme political ideologies, extreme political views, right? And without even someone else to criticize them. I'm just talking about people I've known, right? I could sit down with some of these people and just play the tape. Like, did you realize you said that? Like, this will bring about a change on the part of the behavior of the university professor. Now, guys, students are not angels. I wonder what impact it would have if you started really invigilating the behavior of students. Where it's like, look, not only is it we know you cheated on the test, it's a real issue, and I've really seen it, cheating on tests and exams. But like where some authority figure is sitting down with the student saying, look, this is what you did during that 1 hour lecture. You played video games. Sitting like, we know, we have videotape evidence that you sat and played video games. You weren't paying attention. You're not taking notes. You're not doing this. You're not that. But maybe that you were sleeping, whatever. I mean, I've been in the room where every other student aside from myself, the extent to which they're in no way participating in their own education, or they're not doing what academia demands of them. And you can have rules. You can enforce this. You can enforce higher standards of excellence in behavior. So yes, Sam Walsh mentions car dash cams. So this is a camera on the dashboard of a car. Cars now increasingly have cameras built in them. Yeah, I mean, I'm just barely old enough to remember when that was new, But for my generation, I mean, if you were just 5 years younger than me, you didn't see that change. I remember reading a story in the newspaper, and it was very moving. And it was from a black guy describing the racism of the police. This was in Toronto, in Canada, and them grabbing him and throwing him on the hood of the car and this stuff, But what happened at that time was that you found that many, many of the people who at that time, because they weren't aware of the dashboard cameras themselves, because it was that new, many of the people who claimed the police were racist and claimed they were corrupt and claimed misconduct, the dash cam footage proved that the person making that complaint was either deeply dishonest or insane or both. I saw a lot of that just at that time, right? When it was really new, that actually people had become accustomed to being able to make up stories about police misconduct. Now, some of the police misconduct was real, but so many people were lying before the advent of the dash cam, right? So this is another real change, right? So yeah, this is an answer waiting for someone to ask the question. As soon as we allow the regulation of guns, this is the answer, not just in the United States, in Switzerland, in Taiwan, in Japan, in communist China. The answer already exists. The answer is there, and the answer is irrefutable. Some things are so trivial, they should not be recorded by hidden cameras, or I'm not saying hidden cameras, miniature cameras, portable cameras, right? If you put your kid into a daycare center, do you want the daycare center to have cameras on all the time? Let's say one kid in a million dies in a horrible accident while they're at a daycare center, right? Let's say something terrible happens to just one kid in a million at a daycare center. Do you want it recorded if something goes wrong? If your kid is somehow hurt or harmed, do you want to have recording of that? We accept that pilots in airplanes have no privacy. There is a black box recorder in every cockpit. Every single word that the pilot says is recorded. Every decision, every button he or she presses while flying the plane. Why? Because it matters. We have an uniterated, unspoken standard that some things matter, so they must be recorded, however inconvenient or embarrassing. Again, there's a further question that requires legislation, requires an amendment to the Constitution, I think in every country in the world is. What happens to that footage? Does everyone get to hear it? Like, is there an access? Is there a process where when the plane crashes, if my ex-wife dies in the plane crash or something, I want to know exactly what went wrong with the pilot? Can I access the recordings? Can anyone, or is it only released when some government agency or some private corporation has had the opportunity to censor it, to decide whether or not it'll be employed? These are big, momentous questions, right? Something as seemingly trivial as dropping your kid off at daycare, something that obviously involves life and death decisions like flying an airplane. When you pull the trigger of a gun, how can that possibly be less significant a decision than pressing send on a text message? Of course, your location should be recorded. Of course, a digital photograph should be taken. Of course, it should be uploaded to a database. Your pinpoint location on a map and these other details should be immortalized. They should be available to the authorities, to the police. I would say they should be available to journalists or to anyone who's interested. Your own relatives, your own cousin is wondering what happened in that shooting and you were involved with. They should be able to get the objective truth, right? And we have already decided that we're willing to sacrifice our so-called privacy, a concept that's not in the Constitution, that's not legally defined, it's just a cultural notion of privacy. We have decided that we're willing to give up that privacy every time we send an email from a cellular phone, every time we send a text message. Of course, we should give up the idea of impunity, anonymity, privacy when we pull the trigger of a gun. Of course. There are not two sides to that debate. There is one answer, and it's the same answer for Switzerland, for Taiwan, for Thailand, as it is for the United States of America. It is an answer waiting for someone being willing to ask the question.